Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
And good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 30th of April. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information around Alaska, no matter what community or village you're in. You can do that very easily by going to weather.gov/Alaska. This time of the year, it's also a good idea to check out the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center. As you well know, along the main stem rivers, we are starting to see the beginnings of breakup. Some of you well into breakup already. You can check out the river forecast page as well as conditions for breakup in your community by going to weather.gov/APRFC. That's Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, APRFC again. So, the weather info line's open. That'll give you information as well. 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And as always, I love to tell you about this because more and more people are finding it. The daily afternoon weather map briefing. It's like what you'll see here, just in a shorter condensed version. It works great on your mobile device. If you're in the bush or on the road system, doesn't matter. It comes in really quickly on YouTube. You can go to AKwx and find it that way. Or after the show here, you can get the complete broadcast of Alaska weather if you're out on the ship and don't get back in time to see the entire show on the air. You can watch it online. Same way, AKwx TV will get you the entire broadcast there. Let's take a look at some of the Alaska weather headlines as we're looking at the weather around the 49th today. Mild April temperatures mean a mush out for many rivers. You can try saying that 5 times fast as well. But we all know that a pretty warm month for many locations has led to, it seems like, a little bit of an earlier breakout or mush out for some of the rivers. You're probably seeing some of those conditions changing in your community. And River Watch is beginning. In the next several days, volunteers and employees from the National Weather Service and the state of Alaska, and probably some partners in your community, will be flying over the river to check out the conditions and watch for ice jams and potential flooding upstream and downstream from your location. You can help. By reporting your observations, you can help the teams around Alaska prevent more problems from happening. So please, if you see changes there on your river, around your village, let us know. Again, you can do that by going to weather.gov/APRFC or sending a tweet. Use the hashtag breakup and AKwx. Bering sea ice is opening up. If you're out on the west coast, you've probably seen changes there as well. There's a large chunk of water that's opening up in the western Bering. We'll look at that coming up here in just a little bit. And the North Slope continues under fog and some light snow showers. That trend will continue at least for the next several days. Let's take a look at the breakup map. This is what you'll find if you go to weather.gov/APRFC. You'll notice many areas there along the Copper as well as the Tanana. Certainly the North Fork of the Upper Kuskokwim. Most of those areas are at least some open, and some of them are mostly open. Many rivers, of course, including the Yukon at this point, are still mostly ice. But watch for changes. If it's happening here, it's going to happen there in not too long. So again, report your changes and your observations. We really do appreciate your help. And this map will be updated every day and sometimes many times a day, depending on the information that we get from you and from the field. In the meantime, we're still monitoring the fire danger around the interior of Alaska. South Central has seen some improvements with recent rain showers in the region, but conditions are still very dry. And it's always a good idea this time of the year to be fire-wise. Look around your building, look around your school, look around your business, and make sure that conditions are set up to manage a dangerous and dry situation as we move into the early part of summer, where conditions will be even drier than they are right now for many of us. Here's a look out to the west, and here's one thing I want you to keep an eye on as we go through the next several maps in the satellite picture. This area of low pressure here coming off of eastern Asia and China. As this moves slowly eastward across the southern Kamchatka Peninsula, this is going to be a dominant weather player in the many days to come, probably the next week or so. The jet stream is taking a large dip here across the west. It rises up and makes a ridge across the Bering and takes another dip across the Gulf of Alaska. You can see that movement here one more time, keeping the jet stream in mind. Weather's pretty quiet across the Bering. In fact, we've got some drier, warmer weather out across the west. Pretty calm conditions across the Aleutians. Winds will be fairly light for the next several days. And south of that, another major storm track, that weather superhighway is well south of Alaska, as it has been for several months. Now, remember, that storm is way out in the west. We're not really going to see that very well, at least on this view, but that whole trend is keeping weather moving into southeastern Alaska. Once again, windy conditions for central and southern parts of southeast today, and in many locations, at least some wet weather. Juneau picked up about a ½ inch of rainfall today. Many other locations, about a tenth or so across the Panhandle. Many locations west of that, though, were drier than yesterday. Prince William Sound not nearly as wet as what we saw yesterday. South Central saw many more patches of blue sky. The interior also looking at fairly dry weather from Fairbanks westward down the Yukon and all the way out toward the west coast. You can see drier patches of sky there for the southern facing slopes of the Brooks Range and into Kotzebue Sound, where temperatures were fairly warm there as well. The North Slope, not so much. Low clouds, light snow, and fog were all part of your day again. And with high pressure well north of Barrow, the position is such that we'll probably keep that low deck of clouds at least close to home, if not right over your home, as we go into the middle part of the weekend and probably the end. Now here's a look at the weather map. Don't forget about that low pressure system out in the west. Again, you're going to start to see that show up here on the left-hand side of your screen. As we look at the right-hand side of your screen first, we'll see that we've got some light rain across most areas. Some of that, again, reached up to Juneau and at times was a little bit heavier, about a ½ inch, as I said. Out across the northern and western Gulf, we saw conditions be fairly dry, with a lot of dry air wrapping up into this low pressure system. And you'll remember, low pressure is nothing more than a vacuum or a void of the air. So air wants to flow into this from all different directions. And when it does that, it goes up and bubbles up the clouds here. But if there's not a lot of moisture, you won't see as many clouds in a situation like that. We also have a trough of low pressure, a broader area of low pressure instead of just a concentrated low. This is a very broad area of low pressure that helps to encourage cloud growth and development and a little bit of a wind shift, but not too much of a temperature shift as we would see with the leading edge of a cold air that we draw like this with a cold front. So not a whole lot happening along this boundary here. We have seen some fog out across the Bering, but remember, conditions are pretty mild there thanks to that upper level ridge of high pressure across the Bering. The North Slope, right, clouds, low fog, and probably some spotty snow showers from time to time. Didn't sound like a whole lot of places got a whole lot of snow today, but it certainly was unsettled there with high pressure just on the top end of your screen. Watch what happens as we get into tonight. We are still dealing with the low just offshore of southeast. It's not very strong, but it's enough to keep that moisture moving right into southeastern Alaska. There might even be room for a thunderstorm. There's probably not enough atmospheric energy to get those started there, but if we did see one of those start up anywhere in Alaska, the best chance is probably just offshore of southern southeast. There's also a better chance for some heavier rainfall there and some higher altitude snow. Most of that will be pretty high up. That's exactly what we're seeing across south central Alaska tonight and into the interior. As we go into the higher terrain in the interior, chances are snow line is going to be around 2,500 to about 3,000 feet. So if you see any precipitation develop, it's probably going to be a little bit higher up in the hills before you get into any snowfall. So conditions are warming up there for sure. Out across the west, periods of rain and snow showers across the Bering, and we just see the beginnings of that next storm. There it is across the western Aleutians now, 993 millibarlow. Not terribly strong, but certainly a disruptor of the weather pattern coming in across the western chain. Low pressure will try and spin up into something here across the central Bering. Not very strong either, so not much to get worried about, except it's changing the wind direction a little bit. Out across south central, spotty areas of showers for Friday, a better chance for more of a rainfall across southeastern Alaska. Most of the interior, especially north of the Yukon Valley, will be dry and maybe even cloud-free or mostly sunny, let's say. Some pockets of snow showers across the North Slope, a better chance that you'll see fog and low clouds. And there's another storm system in the south and western Gulf. So as we get into Saturday, now we have two areas of low pressure, one across the central and western Gulf, a ridge of high pressure clearing things up for southeast. Maybe Saturday's your day to get things done outside and enjoy a little bit of vitamin D if you can. Some rainfall across the Alaska Range and also across the lower to mid Yukon Valley into the YK Delta. For areas a little bit closer to the coast, especially around Norton Sound, you'll probably deal with rain and snow showers. Remember, the water is still very cold there across Norton Sound, even though the ice seems to be eroding somewhat. there's still a better chance that you're going to see some mixed precipitation closer to the coast as temperatures are considerably cooler there. Out across the central and western chain, a 994 millibar low moves into the places closer to Adak and Atka and Kiska. That frontal boundary sweeps eastward. With that comes a surge of warmer air working northward. We'll see rain and snow showers on the northern side. The southern side, and certainly in the west, will much more likely be in the form of rainfall. And snow showers continue for the north slope, as does the clouds, as does the fog. Again, that should continue well through the weekend. Let's take a look at temperatures there. For southeast today, again, a fairly mild day. Not as warm as it was earlier in the week, but not too bad. Mid-40s there from Juneau, Skagway, Ketchikan, Sitka, all the way down toward Annette and Hyder and Klawock and Craig. Upper 40s there as you get into British Columbia as well. Prince William Sound saw temperatures just shy of 50 if you were around Valdez or Cordova out toward Middleton Island. 50 for Seward and Homer. 47 in Kenai, 52 in Anchorage at 3 o'clock, 50 around Talkeetna. 47 in Healy, just above 50 degrees in Fairbanks, just below it in Fort Greely. 51 in Eagle, 48 in Northway, and 43 in Fort Yukon. Northward, we see temps in the teens, 20s, and 30s. Arctic Village, just shy of the freezing point. It was 18 in Anaktuvuk Pass. Mid-teens for the Arctic coast, 14 around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, 16 in Atkasuk, 1 degree warmer in Barrow today. Kotzebue Sound saw temps in the teens and 20s, a little bit cooler around Kotzebue than it was out around Tin City. 34 in Nome, 35 in Unalakleet. It was 51 in Galena, watching breakups slowly come your way. 52 around McGrath. Lower 50s around Sparivon and 51 in Bethel, milder today there. But as evidence of that colder coastal temperature pattern, you can see 30s all the way around Norton Sound, around Ammonok, down toward Nunivak Island, and then once you get inland toward Bethel, considerably warmer weather there. Here's Bristol Bay, 43 in Dillingham today, 50 in King Salmon. Lake Iliamna was also at 50 degrees. Mid-40s for Kodiak Island, lower to mid-40s for most of the Alaska Peninsula, though we did have a few cool spots in the upper 30s today. Lower 40s around the Pribilofs, and 30s and 40s for the central and western chain, including Adak and Atka. Overnight low temperatures will hover close to freezing from the upper Yukon all the way down to the YK Delta and Bristol Bay. Just shy of 40 in Kodiak, mid to upper 30s for south central, just shy of 40 for southeastern Alaska. Seward Peninsula is looking at 27 in Nome and teens and 20s for the northern side. Kotzebue Sound closer to 20. Lower teens for most of the North Slope, and by tomorrow high temperatures could jump about 10 degrees or so back to nearly 20 degrees. So again, watch for low clouds, fog, and a few isolated snow showers. Across the middle Yukon Valley, look for lower to mid-50s in most places. Fairbanks might be up to 56. South Central back in the mid-50s as well. A mild day for Kodiak at 51 and closer to 50 for southeastern Alaska. The Bering Sea coast from Norton Sound to the southwest to the Aleutians, all looking at temperatures from the mid to upper 30s in the north to the lower 40s for the peninsula and all the way out towards Shemya. Now, for flying weather, we expect IFR conditions, obviously, for the North Slope, with widespread areas of fog and snow and low clouds and freezing temperatures. Again, we'll watch for some flying obstructions there, but out across Kotzebue Sound, maybe some pockets of clearing there, especially along the northern coastline. The northern Seward Peninsula probably dealing with fog, as well as areas through the Bering Strait, through St. Matthew, and through the St. Paul and St. George region. Now, as we get out toward Bristol Bay, pockets of IFR are expected there. A broader area of clearing across the north Gulf Coast. And then, once again, we're going to watch for a few thunderstorms generally outside of the Dixon entrance and offshore. IFR conditions may prevail as you head into the inner coastal waterways there, maybe for Ketchikan and Annette, and southward through the Dixon entrance. Out to the west, developing weather there will start to spread more clouds, more moisture, and worse visibility coming in from the south and from the west. That should affect only places closer to Shemya and Attu. Now, for past conditions, we expect some improvements. If you are looking at IFR conditions in the morning, you may see that fog bank shift northward during the day, but you may get out of the pass. You might not get a whole lot further across the coastal plain there, depending on what your ratings are there. So keep that in mind. The pass may improve, but might not be a whole lot better on the north side of that. Adigan Pass, likely IFR again to start the day through the pass and improving during the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, similar conditions, in fact. A poor visibility to start, but improvement expected during your Friday. Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, Isabel Pass, all looking pretty good. VFR conditions there. Mentasta Pass probably improving quickly during the mid-morning hours. Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR. Portage Pass, we're going to call MVFR, developing during the afternoon with rain showers and maybe even some higher elevation snow showers during the day. Chilkoot and White Pass also expected to see similar precipitation trends in the afternoon, so watch for some buildup and showery weather there. Tomorrow morning's freezing levels, well, you can see the warmer air is kind of dissipating a little bit across the eastern Gulf. We've got freezing levels around 2,000 feet. The surface freezing line undercutting that a little bit, moving back toward the middle Yukon Valley. Out across the Bering as well, that colder weather is trying to hold on this surface freezing line just shy of the ice edge. Icing potential will stay below 8,000 feet. When I see low clouds, when I see temperatures sub-freezing and snow showers falling, that's a pretty good indication that there's going to be at least some light icing potential there across the North Slope. So keep that in mind if you're trying to get around along the Brooks Range and points north toward the Arctic coast. South central, southwest, and out into the Bering Sea, very patchy icing potential. In fact, the thread is pretty small, but it is worth mentioning. Above 4,000 to about 6,000 feet, hit and miss light icing potential there. Probably not anywhere close to moderate at this point. The jet stream shows that very, oh gosh, what do you want to call that? Unstable pattern there. We have a very wavy jet stream here, low pressure sitting across the North Pacific, and another wave just south of the Alaska Peninsula. And if you even look here, there's another trough of low pressure with high pressure dropping down across the North Slope. This is unstable, this is progressive, and as long as it keeps moving, the weather's going to change up here in the next 3 to 5 days or so. If this gets locked in place, well, interesting things will happen. We'll deal with that as it comes. At 9,000 feet, you can see the weather pattern is changing from yesterday. We have a ridge of high pressure slowing the weather down across the Gulf. The faster moving winds across southern southeast have dissipated. Lighter southerly winds across the west coast. Here's another wave of low pressure, and our faster winds developing across the western chain. You can see that more clearly at 3,000 feet. With winds between 25 and 40 knots again from the south and west. Otherwise, light winds across the interior, across the North Slope, across southwest. All very light but predominantly southerly flow. Winds coming in from the west and southwest to the Panhandle, about 5 to as high as 20 knots. But all in all, not a whole lot to report there for the 9 and 3,000 foot wind charts today. Turbulence potential has also improved over what we saw yesterday, so for tomorrow, below 5,000 feet, just outside of the Dixon entrance. One thing to watch out, of course, for this time of the year and going into the summer, thunderstorms, of course, imply icing and turbulence and poor visibility at times. So watch for that. Anytime you start to see the puffball, bubbly clouds, it means there could be some aviation hazards ahead. Out across the west, we'll watch for turbulence to increase across the western chain and the western Bering Sea in days to come, but not so much trouble tomorrow. Let's look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in just a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Connecting the dots, the stargazer's way. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. Did you know that the International Astronomical Union officially recognizes 88 constellations?
88 constellations may sound like a lot, but from where most people live, we can only see a few dozen of them. There's only one region in the world where you can see all 88 constellations.
And that's the equator. During the course of the year, you can see all the constellations, and some of them are pretty strange. We're all familiar with the constellation of Ursa Major, the Great Bear, or Orion the Hunter. But did you know that from the equator and places south of it, you can see constellations representing more modern things like microscopes and furnaces?
You're probably wondering who came up with all these constellations, and how can we come up with our own star patterns?
Well, that's the focus of this episode. As Jack Horkheimer often said, make the stars your own. So we're going to play Connect the Dots, the Stargazer's way. Let's show you.
For thousands of years, our ancestors have looked up at the night sky and wondered what it all was. Even as recently as 100 years ago, before the proliferation of street lights, if you went outside on a clear moonless night, you could see thousands of stars right from your backyard.
Without a scientific understanding of what the stars actually were, many ancient cultures thought the stars were either distant campfires or even gods. Each of these points of light was fixed in position relative to the others, appearing to rise in the east and set in the west night after night.
Imagine how magical, mysterious, and awesome the heavens must have seemed to our ancestors. As a person went from youth to old age, they would see the same stars in the same locations year after year. The same at age 5 as at age 50. And the sky seemed so high above them that the stars were unreachable, as if they were attached to the inside of a large bowl with us at the center.
We humans love to make patterns out of the things we see that are fairly random, like seeing the shape of a bunny rabbit in the clouds on a lazy summer day. So although the distribution of the stars in the night sky is random, your brain immediately wants to make patterns out of the brightest stars.
So, as our ancestors spent their evenings gazing at the stars, they would play a celestial game of connect the dots, making patterns, both big and small, that represented objects, animals, or people. We call these patterns constellations. There are currently 88 officially recognized constellations in modern astronomy. Which constellations you can see depends on where on Earth you're observing. For example, people who live in Australia can see some of the same stars that we can see from North America, but not all of them, and vice versa.
Australians can see the Southern Cross, but only a few of us in North America can. North Americans can see Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Lyra the Harp, but New Zealanders can see Pavo the Peacock and Horologium the Clock. The only place on Earth where you can see all 88 constellations is at the equator.
So, as people around the world played connect the dots with the stars, they would create fanciful stories about each of the constellations they created. Many of these stories were used to pass down cultural values of morality or tell stories about love, courage, or honor.
As northern astronomers began visiting the southern hemisphere, they made their own constellations and named them after more modern objects and animals like microscopes and toucans.
Sadly, because we have so many street lights today, many of the fainter stars are invisible from where most people live. Therefore, we have gotten out of the habit of creating new stories and new star patterns.
But think of it. Next time you go out camping, do as Jack Horkheimer often said, make the stars your own. Start connecting the dots and see what fun patterns you can come up with. Who knows, you might be the first person to create the constellation of the smartphone.
It's easy to do when you keep looking up.
Let's take a look at the sea ice around western Alaska and the Bering Sea. We were talking about a lot of changes in the west. This is where this is happening. This is not completely open water. There's still pieces of ice floating around there, but it's getting very close to that, as reported by our Sea Ice Desk team earlier today. Weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php is the way to track this anytime you want. You can get an interactive map, click on it, and check the concentrations anywhere you go. Pull the map in, zoom it in, check out places like Norton Sound here, and look for some of the changes there. Cook Inlet remains ice-free at this point. Bristol Bay and north of the Pribilofs also looking at fairly open water. So a lot of changes and more to come. Here's a look at southeast marine forecast now. Winds will be fairly light on the outer coast, 10 to 15 knots there, as strong as 20 knots near Dixon Entrance with a 12-foot sea. Across the inner coast, anywhere from 10 knots around Stevens Passage with a southerly flow pushing up toward 20 knots in the northern Lynn Canal with a 3-foot sea, southeasterlies in Clarence Strait. For Saturday, winds diminish even more. I'm still looking at about 10 knots for most of the outer coast. Winds may be variable outside of Cross Sound. Northeasterlies light across the inner waterways. Southerly flow across the Lynn Canal, and winds very light across Clarence Strait with a 2-foot sea. Should be a good day outside. For Friday in South Central, variable flow inside of Prince William Sound. A great start to the boating weekend there, and probably a little bit higher summer traffic out there. South and westerly flow across Cook Inlet. Westerlies coming across the Barrens from 15 to 20 knots, and westerlies east of Kodiak at 20 knots with a 6-foot sea. By Saturday, stronger winds set in across the Barrens and especially Kodiak, 20 to 25 knots for Saturday. Seas come up to 8 feet there, but inside Prince William Sound, still looking nice with a variable light flow and almost flat seas. And looks like a variable and light wind up and down Cook Inlet as well. So enjoy the water on Saturday and probably into Sunday. For Friday, south and westerly flow there across Bristol Bay, 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Looking for westerlies on the Pacific side, 15 knots with a 6-foot sea. Variable flow north of the Alaska Peninsula. For Saturday, northerlies kick in across Bristol Bay and all the way down toward the Bering Sea coast. Still looking at northerly flow at 15 knots, 2 to 3-foot seas there. Northeasterlies a little bit stronger across the Pacific, 30 knots with a 8 to 9-foot sea on Saturday. For the Aleutians, look for northwesterly winds to continue for the central and eastern chain, 15 knots in just about all areas for the central and eastern sections, even a variable and lighter flow south of Adak and Atka. Southerlies for the western chain, anywhere from 20 to 35 knots, 4 to 8-foot seas for Friday as you head out across the west. For Saturday, you can see the winds picking up more across southeast, looking at 35 knots, or I should say the western Aleutians. 11 to 13 foot seas are expected. Winds are from the southeast. That's where I was going, 35 knots there. Look for more of a east and southeasterly flow for the central chain. And the wind's shifting around here because we've got a ridge of high pressure feeding right back into low pressure and a developing low pressure system out to the west. Remember that storm that we were watching coming over from eastern Asia? That will be the next big thing for the western chain. Now for the west coast on Friday, northerly flow across St. Lawrence Island, 20 knots with a 2-foot sea. Look for southwesterlies across St. Paul with a 4-foot sea, and light westerly winds coming into the upper Kuskokwim Bay. Also areas around St. Matthew, looking at very flat seas there, 10 knots with a variable flow. And remember, the water still has some ice in it out here. It's not completely open, but in ice-free waters, so you're looking at a 1-foot sea. We're going to skip on to the north slope now with the north and easterly flow for Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, a light northerly flow at 10 knots. Otherwise, easterlies from Barrow down toward Cape Lisburne, 15 to 25 knots, and northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots. For Saturday, winds still pretty light in all areas. There might be a little bit of a stronger breeze, let's say, up around Dead Horse and Kaktovik. And remember, your most concerning weather is probably going to be the low clouds, the fog, and those isolated snow showers, and probably some icing concerns for aviation as a result of that as we go through the remainder of the weekend. Let's recap your weather tonight. As we go into the weekend, we're looking at low pressure sitting just off the outer coast there for southeast. Ahead of that wave of low pressure, we might see a thunderstorm or two. Probably nothing too serious there, and the threat is very small. Across southeast, a better chance for light rain and low clouds. South central looking at rain showers up above 25 to about 3,000 feet. You're looking at some of that mixing in with or changing over to snow, but no heavy accumulations expected. We'll see some snow showers across the north slope and unsettled weather across the west coast. Most of that will be clouds and spotty showers of rain and snow, especially closer to the coastline itself. For south central, watch for the clouds to bubble up in the afternoon and maybe some showers with that. A better chance for steadier rainfall in southeast. A storm in the southwestern Gulf starts to move eastward, and so does a new storm out across the west. That moves into the western Aleutians by Saturday, with things quieting down for southeast heading into your weekend. So enjoy that. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.